What if your life was woven into the tapestry of conquest, but you were nothing more than a pawn in a warlord's game? What if the very air you breathed was laced with the scent of blood and the whispers of betrayal? The Mongol Empire, a whirlwind of ambition and brutality, thrived on the backs of women whose stories twisted like the smoke of countless campfires, stories both untold and forgotten. Welcome to a world where love wore the skin of a blade, where the lullabies sung to restless children were anthems of impending violence. Marrying a Mongol warrior wasn't just a commitment, it was a high-stakes gamble with death as the house dealer. Picture this, a woman, heart racing like the hooves of a galloping horse, sewn into a life of servitude and survival. Every meal served in the shadow of a yurt carried the weight of 1,000 expectations. You think your Tinder date's family is intimidating? Try meeting your new in-laws after they've just pillaged a city. Behind those fierce smiles and battle-scarred brows lies a fierce intelligence, a survival instinct honed sharper than any sword. The cunning of these women rivals even the most shrewd political strategist of today's boardrooms. Their laughter echoes through the steppes, a dark humor that dances on the edge of despair. You call this a feast, one might say, eyeing a bowl of horse-meat stew. At least the horses have been tenderized by my husband's last conquest. But beneath the banter, a storm brews. The Mongol wife, a silent architect of the empire's machinations, is often the unseen hand pushing the chess pieces. Betrayal lurks, not just from rivals, but from within, the poisonous whispers of jealousy and ambition. Can a woman love her husband while plotting his demise? Can she cradle her children and harbor dreams of glory? The lines blur, and the stakes skyrocket. As the world around her crumbles in the wake of her husband's campaigns, she stands tall, a sentinel of secrets. Her eyes glint with the fire of fortitude, they tell tales of dreams sacrificed at the altar of a man's ambition. Survival isn't just an instinct, it's an art form. She weaves her narrative into the very fabric of the empire she helps build, one thread at a time, knowing full well that the moment she falters, the tapestry unravels. So, what is it truly like to live inside the heart of a storm? To embrace chaos while cloaked in the garb of tradition? To balance power and vulnerability on a knife's edge? The dark comedy of her existence beckons, an existential riddle wrapped in the enigma of a life far removed from the mundane, yet hauntingly relatable. With every heartbeat, every flicker of the campfire, the truth pulses beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed. And once you step into this world, be warned, escape becomes a question of will. The very essence of being a Mongol wife is not just a story, it's a reckoning. You can't unsee what you're about to witness. The air felt electric with the tension of 1,000 unspoken words. A woman stood at the edge of a vast steppe, her silhouette stark against the fading light. The sun, a molten ball of fire, sank beneath the horizon, casting long shadows that whispered secrets of power and pain. She tightened her grip around the leather reins, her knuckles white. Her heart raced, thundering like the hooves of the horses galloping behind her, a reminder of the chaos that lay just beyond the next ridge. Tamer, fierce as a storm and fierce with the fear of what was to come, was acutely aware of her place in a world that seemed to teeter on the brink of annihilation. I remember the scent of the smoke, she would say later, her voice trembling, the acrid tang of burnt earth and hair, the cries of men echoing with the cries of women, both caught in a ceaseless tide of war. Each recall was a serrated edge, slicing through the fabric of her delicate resolve. The Mongol horde was notorious, unrelenting, and yet, in the thick of battle, it was often the women like her who held the tapestry of life together, needle-pricking hope into a world unraveling at the seams. Behind her, in the tumult of their makeshift camp, sat Borta. With her dark hair cascading around her shoulders, she weaved their story into the threads of a carpet, each not a memory, each color a heartbeat. These colors, she murmured to herself, they sing of our victories, our losses. To the untrained eye, she was merely an artisan, to those who dared look closer, she was a warrior in her own right, wielding her loom as fiercely as any man wielded a sword. Her hands, calloused but graceful, moved with purpose, each stroke a defiance against a society that sought to confine her spirit. I remember, she would whisper, when they said I was too weak, too fragile. But weakness is a state of mind, isn't it? I am steel wrapped in silk. With every thread woven, Borta etched her rebellion into the very fibers of their existence, a quiet revolution that echoed through the hearts of those who witnessed it. It was an act of love and war, a testament to women who dared to rise against the tides of expectation and tradition. But the air thickened with foreboding as night fell, cloaking them in a shroud of uncertainty. The flickering flames of their campfire cast eerie silhouettes, creatures of shadow that danced with the weight of duality, their very lives teetered between the mundane and the mythical. It was at this juncture that the voices of the past crept in, reminders of mothers lost, of sisters taken, of battles fought not just against enemies in the field, but against the very fabric of their identities. "Do they see us?" Tamar asked, her voice a bare whisper, eyes wide with a haunting mixture of hope and despair. "Do they see the strength we wield, the power we possess?" She often felt like a ghost haunting a world that forgot her existence. Torn between the roles of mother, warrior, and provider, each day felt like a balancing act on a knife's edge, each step forward a daring leap into the unknown. The stars blinked down, indifferent witnesses to their plight, but in their vastness, Tamar found a sliver of solace. Somewhere out there, we are more than this, she would remind herself, more than wives, more than mothers, like the stars, we are boundless. Each night, she would connect her own heartbeat to the cosmic rhythm, reminding her that while she may have been a woman in a world dominated by men, she too had a place in the infinite tapestry of existence. Yet, as the fire crackled and the wind howled, the truth loomed heavy like a dark cloud, a confrontation was imminent. It was not just with the outside world but with the very men fighting beside them. Would they accept their strength, or see them as mere shadows? Would they understand that women were not simply supporters but essential architects of their fate? And then it happened, the moment that would forever ripple through the fabric of their lives. A band of warriors, faces painted with the dust of battle, returned from a raid, their eyes burning with triumph and bloodlust. One of them, a rugged figure named Batu, strode toward Tamar, his presence both magnetic and menacing. "You've held the hearth," he said, a mixture of respect and condescension in his tone, "but can you hold a sword?" The question cut deeper than any blade. Tamar's heart thundered, pulsating with a mix of fury and fear. "I have held my child and watched him grow. I have held my family together while you were away, withering under the weight of your absence," she shot back, her voice a whip, snapping through the tension. In that moment, the camp fell silent, the air thick with the weight of her challenge. Here stood a woman whose very existence was a testament to defiance. Borta, sensing the shift, stepped forward, her hand still stained with the dye of her craft. "We weave the threads of destiny," she declared, her voice steady as iron. "We are not here to merely support, we are here to build, to fight, to exist." The flames flickered, casting a bold glow around them, illuminating not just their faces but the very essence of their beliefs. The confrontation simmered, an intensity that could ignite fires or forge alliances. Tamar and Borta stood united, their spirits intertwined like the threads of Borta's loom, bound by the shared understanding of their worth, of their struggle. They were warriors, not of swords and shields, but of resilience and rebellion, standing at the precipice of change. As the night deepened and the stars blinked on, the echoes of their words lingered in the space between them and the men who had always held the swords. It was a moment fraught with tension, a heartbeat suspended in time, as if the cosmos itself held its breath, waiting to see whether this would be the dawn of a new understanding or merely another night of silence. And in that quiet, just before the chaos erupted anew, Tamar felt the weight of possibility. "I remember," she thought, "when we were just shadows. But tonight, we are fire." The air hung heavy, thick with desperation and the scent of unresolved fate. I stood at the threshold, the door creaking open like a groaning heart on the brink of collapse. Within, the shadows whispered secrets, and every flicker of candlelight cast dancing specters upon the walls. This was the moment when dreams dissolved into harsh reality, a cosmic joke played by the universe, where love and duty twisted into a grotesque ballet. Amina's fingers trembled as she clutched the edges of her wedding gown, a fragile illusion of purity, the fabric a stark contrast to the turmoil roiling within her. Her eyes darted to the worn wooden floorboards, identifying each crack like the fragments of her broken aspirations. She had glimpsed freedom in the bright horizon of her youth, yet the weight of her father's expectations chained her to this moment. "I remember the first time I dreamt of love," she thought, heart racing, and how far removed that dream feels now. Across the room, Javad leaned against the wall, his soul wrestling with a familiar sense of dread. He stared down at the bride price his family had negotiated, piles of coins glinting like vultures waiting for their feast. They had given him no choice in this, his desires silenced by tradition, his voice buried beneath the deafening roar of familial obligation. What does it mean to marry a stranger, he thought, anguish clawing at his insides. What does it mean to love under the weight of a ledger? Time twisted around them, each second a lifetime of uncertainty. The air crackled, filled with unspilled tears and words left unsaid. Javad caught Amina's gaze, and in that fleeting moment, they exchanged a world of understanding. Two souls caught in the relentless tide of expectation, struggling to stay afloat. I see you, he mouthed silently, and for a heartbeat, their hearts surged in unison, defying the cruel tapestry woven by their families. Amina's breath quickened, the sound of her pulse pounding in her ears. She remembered her mother's laughter, how it would echo through the house like a song, fading now, replaced with the stony silence of tradition. I remember the day you told me that love is a choice, she whispered to the shadows, but did you mean the choice to be shackled? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the walls seemed to lean closer, closing in on her fragile spirit. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Amina's father entered, his presence as imposing as a storm. His eyes were dark pools of unfeeling authority, and the room trembled at the weight of his unspoken demands. It's time, he declared, voice heavy like a funeral bell. This union will secure our family's future. Javad's heart sank, he could almost hear the iron grip of tradition tightening around them, a noose crafted from generations of expectation. Will you marry me? Javad's voice cracked against the weight of his own doubts. The question hung between them, raw and exposed. Amina's heart raced as she pondered the gravity of his inquiry, the silent battle waging within her. Could she truly bind herself to a man she hardly knew while her heart ached for freedom? The answer was buried deep, tangled in the roots of her upbringing. I remember my mother's stories about love, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. But they always ended with the sound of wedding bells drowning out the cries of dreams deferred. A flicker of fear crossed Javad's face, he knew the toll this arrangement would take. The price of love, it seemed, was never just monetary. Their intimate moment shattered as Amina's mother burst into the room, her eyes wide with panic. Get ready, she cried, urgency lacing her words. The guests are arriving. The world outside was shifting, just as their lives were, and the urgency of the moment surged through them like a tempest. Amina felt the walls closing in, the weight of expectations pressing upon her chest. What if I refuse? The thought pulsed through her mind like a heartbeat, fierce and demanding. Each passing moment echoed with the ghosts of women who had walked this path before her, sacrificing their souls for the sake of conformity, their laughter silenced, their hearts caged. I cannot be another ghost, she thought, defiance igniting a flicker of hope within her. She searched Javad's eyes, seeking a spark of rebellion. Would he stand with her against the tide? Or was he as trapped as she was? Let's run, he breathed, the words spilling from his lips like a secret too dangerous to hold. We could leave everything behind, the coins, the expectations, the weight of tradition. Just you and me. The world beyond the door loomed like an ominous shadow, filled with laughter and celebration, but within her, a storm brewed, a desperate longing for an escape. But could they sever the ties that had been woven so tightly around them? The clock on the wall ticked menacingly, each second a reminder of the choices that seemed to slip through their fingers like sand in an hourglass. I remember a time when the stars felt close enough to touch, Amina whispered, her heart racing. When love was not bound by price. The door creaked, beckoning them toward a future written by hands that were not their own. And yet, in that flickering moment of hope, they stood on the precipice of decision, hearts pounding against the backdrop of unyielding tradition. The universe held its breath, waiting for the choice that would alter the course of their lives forever. Their fingers brushed, igniting a connection that could either spark a revolution or seal their fate. Outside, laughter rang like chimes in the wind, oblivious to the chaos within. The world was waiting, the clock was ticking, and with every heartbeat, they teetered on the edge of the unknown, two souls, intertwined yet unbound, ready to face the storm together. The wind howled like a wounded animal, sending a shiver down my spine. Outside, the vast steppe stretched endlessly, a haunting canvas of pale greens and browns, punctuated by the low hum of distant horses. Inside the yurt, the air was thick with the scent of boiling mutton, mingling with the smoke from the fire. I sat cross-legged on a worn rug, heart pounding like a drum at a funeral, waiting for the storm that was brewing in my family. "Amra! Come here!" My mother's voice sliced through the tension. I hesitated, glancing at my little brother, Batu, whose wide eyes mirrored my own fear. He was always the brave one. "We need to talk." Her tone wrapped around me, squeezing my throat tight. I could feel the weight of her words before they had even been spoken. I stood, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet like the groans of an old man, and stepped toward her. She sat on a low wooden stool, her hands trembling, weathered like the land itself. "They're coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it crashed around us like a thunderclap. The family feud that had simmered for years was finally boiling over. I could hear the faint echo of hooves in the distance, a sound that promised chaos. My heart raced, pounding a frantic rhythm as dread clawed at my insides. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. The shadows of our past had always been lurking, but now they were stepping into the light. My mother's eyes flickered with fear, echoing the same haunted look that had danced in my father's gaze before he disappeared into the cold night, swallowed by the darkness he once roamed with pride. "They want to take what's ours," she said, her voice quaking. "They'll take you away too. You're growing up, Amra. They'll want you." Every word cut deeper, each syllable wrapping around my heart like a vice. I looked at Batu, who clutched his toy horse, oblivious to the storm brewing above his innocent head. "I remember," I whispered, the memories flooding in like an avalanche. I remember the last time the family had fought, the blood on the ground glistening under the pale moonlight, the screams echoing across the steppe. I remembered my father's laugh, rich and warm, now replaced by a ghostly silence. I remembered the stories he used to tell me, of bravery and the land, of how nothing could tear our family apart. But now, those stories felt like brittle bones, cracking under the weight of reality. "Stay close to me, Amra. No matter what happens." My mother grasped my hand as if to tether me to her. I could see the shadows of doubt in her eyes, shadows that whispered of hopelessness and desperation. I felt the heat of her palm burning into me, a reminder that I was still here, still alive, still fighting. Outside, the shadows grew longer, creeping towards us like a predator stalking its prey. The wind shrieked a mournful tune, carrying the echoes of my mother's fears. Each gust felt like a warning. My mind raced, thoughts colliding like horses on a narrow path. What could we do? The answer eluded me, slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. Suddenly, the door of the yurt burst open, and the world exploded into chaos. My uncle, Tsagan, stormed in, his face a mask of anger and worry. He was a mountain of a man, but today he looked smaller, hunched beneath the weight of our family's legacy. "They're here," he growled, each word filled with a feral urgency. "We need to prepare." Batu whimpered, instinctively drawing closer to me, his small body trembling. I could feel my own heart fraying, threads of fear unraveling within me. Tsagan's eyes darted around, searching for something, an answer, a weapon, a miracle. But all we had were the remnants of a family torn apart, the echoes of a life we once knew. "Amra," Tsagan said, his voice softening as he turned to me. "You're strong. You'll have to be stronger than ever now. For Batu." My heart twisted. I was just a girl, not a warrior. How could I protect anyone? But in that moment, something ignited inside me. I remembered my father's stories again, how he spoke of the strength of the steppe, how it could break you but also make you whole. "I will protect him," I vowed, my voice surprisingly steady, a beacon rising within the storm. It felt like a promise whispered to the wind, a declaration made to the cosmos. Just then, shadows loomed outside the yurt's entrance, dark figures against the fading light of dusk. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized their silhouettes. They had come for us, come for what they believed was theirs. The air was electric, heavy with tension, a taut string ready to snap. "Get behind me," my mother commanded, her voice trembling yet fierce. I felt Batu cling to my waist, the heat of his small body grounding me. I could see the flicker of desperation in my mother's eyes, a wild flame fighting to stay alive against the encroaching darkness. In that moment, everything felt surreal, as if the universe had paused to hold its breath. The shadows shifted, and I could hear the low murmur of voices outside, a sinister symphony vibrating through the earth. Each syllable felt like a countdown, a prelude to the inevitable clash that awaited us. "Amra," my mother whispered, her voice laced with fear. "If they take you," she faltered, the words choking her. I could see the ghost of her dreams shattering in her eyes. I wanted to scream, to tell her that we didn't have to talk about that we could fight, that we could resist, but the words wouldn't come. The door creaked, a slow, agonizing sound that echoed like a death knell. Shadows poured in, dark and threatening, and I felt the world tilt beneath me. Time stretched, a taut wire that could snap at any moment. And then, in the heart of the storm, as the darkness engulfed us, I understood. This was not just a fight for our home, our family, but a struggle for our very souls. The air crackled with unspoken words, with fears that churned like a tempest. Life as I knew it was about to change forever. And yet, I stood there, heart thudding, hand clenching Batu's little fist, as the shadows closed in, daring the storm to break. The clock on the wall ticks, each second a thunderous echo in the silence of the dim room. I can almost hear my heart pounding, a frantic drumbeat that drowns out the world outside, an anxious symphony that seems to mock the stillness. Shadows dance across the walls, elongated figures whispering secrets that no one dares to voice. It's the night before the wedding, a night meant for dreaming, but all I can feel is the cold grip of dread wrapping around my throat, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. I glance over at Jenna, her hands trembling slightly as she fiddles with the delicate lace of her wedding dress. It's beautiful, no, breathtaking, but in it, she looks like a fragile bird trapped in a gilded cage. Her eyes dart to the mirror, searching for reassurance in her own reflection. I remember that look, hope and fear intertwined, like vines choking the very life out of the roses they cling to. There's something in her gaze, a flicker of doubt that sends a chill down my spine. Tomorrow, she'll stand before a crowd, a promise of forever hanging in the air, but tonight? Tonight, she seems lost. Do you ever think about running away? I ask, my voice barely a whisper, as if saying it aloud might summon the demons lurking in the shadows. She blinks, surprised, and for a heartbeat, I see it, a spark of something fierce, something alive. Sometimes, she breathes, that one word laced with unspoken fears. But then I think about the consequences. Consequences. The word hangs heavy, filled with echoes of every promise made, every expectation placed upon us. I remember the day we got engaged, how the ring felt like a weight on my finger, a beautiful anchor that threatened to pull me under. I thought about love, the pure kind that's supposed to be easy and bright, but it felt more like a storm brewing on the horizon, dark clouds gathering, ready to unleash their fury. The door creaks, a sound that sends shockwaves through the air. My heart races as I turn to see Mark, my best friend, the one who's supposed to keep me grounded, standing in the doorway. His face is pale, a ghost in the flickering light. "You two need to see this," he says, his voice shaking. "What is it?" Jenna asks, her eyes wide with concern. "Just come." His urgency is palpable, and I follow, the dread curling around my stomach like a serpent. We step into the hallway, the walls closing in around us. Mark leads us to a room filled with laughter, the joyous sounds of a celebration. Or is it? I squint through the dim light, spotting familiar faces, friends, family, each one draped in a mask of happiness, but I can see the tension beneath the surface, the way eyes dart nervously, whispers float like ghosts in the air. Is this what we want? I ask, suddenly questioning everything. I remember the days we spent planning, the laughter echoing in the distance, but now it feels like a distant memory, overshadowed by an unseen weight pressing down on us. Of course it is, Jenna insists, clutching my arm, her grip like a lifeline. But even as she says the words, I can see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. It's as if the very walls are whispering to us, what if? The air grows thick with unspoken words. I can almost taste the fear, a bitter tang on my tongue. We're standing on the precipice, staring down into the unknown, and all I can think is how we've constructed this beautiful dream, yet its foundation feels more like quicksand. Did you ever think about what happens after? Mark's voice cuts through the tension, pulling us back. After the wedding? The vows? Jenna shakes her head, her eyes reflecting the horror of it all, the weight of responsibility, the rituals we're taught to embrace, yet secretly dread. I don't want to think about it. Not tonight. But I can't help it. I remember the stories, the beautiful lies we tell ourselves. The moments when love is easy, but the truth clings to the edges of those memories, screaming for acknowledgement. I think of the responsibilities that will come crashing down like a wave, drowning us in expectations, obligations, and the mundane. I can feel the world spinning out of control, the laughter from the other room morphing into a haunting melody that wraps around my throat. I want to scream, to break the facade of joy, but fear holds me in place. What if we're not ready? What if love isn't enough? As if reading my thoughts, Jenna speaks, her voice trembling like the leaves in a storm. Tomorrow, we promise forever, but what if forever isn't what we think? Her words are a knife cutting through the fabric of our carefully constructed reality, and in that moment, I see the truth in her eyes, a reflection of my own fears. The responsibilities loom, dark and heavy, like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Mark stands between us, a silent witness to our unraveling, and I can see the fight in him, the urge to shield us from the chaos swirling around us. We'll figure it out, he says, but even he sounds unsure, as if he's trying to convince himself just as much as us. The clock ticks again, a reminder that time is slipping through our fingers, and we're standing at the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss. I remember the vows we'll make, the beautiful words that can't encapsulate the weight of reality waiting on the other side. I remember the promises, the laughter, the joy, but it all feels so fragile, like a house of cards in a hurricane. Outside, the night stretches endlessly, stars scattered like shards of glass against an inky sky. It feels vast, ungraspable, like the dreams we once dared to dream. But now? Now it feels heavy, a burden we can't quite carry. And as we stand here, on the brink of commitment, I know that the next chapter will not just be about love, it will be about the rituals that bind us, the responsibilities that threaten to tear us apart. Are we ready? I whisper, the question hanging in the air, an unanswerable riddle that taunts us. In the silence that follows, the shadows seem to stretch, and I know we are caught in a web of our making, a tapestry of hopes and fears, dreams and nightmares. Each moment draws us closer, yet the chasm between us widens, a reminder of the struggle that lies ahead. As the laughter echoes in the background, I hold on to that fleeting moment, the uncertainty, the fear, and the raw, undeniable hope that just maybe, we will find our way. Tomorrow, we take a step into the unknown, and all I can do is hold onto Jenna's hand, feeling the weight of our choices pressing down, as the world around us begins to fade into twilight, a prelude to the chaos yet to come. The air crackled with a tension so thick it clung to the skin, almost like a shroud. A silence stretched over the crowd, heavy and pregnant with anticipation, as if the world had held its breath. The church loomed large, ancient stone looming like a sentinel against the night. Shadows twisted, dim candlelight flickering in a dance, taunting the darkness that threatened to swallow the moment whole. Outside, the wind howled, a ghostly whisper wrapping around the solemnity of the ceremony, echoing the pulse of a heart gripped by fear and hope. I remember the moment my sister stepped through the door, a vision in white, her gown shimmering like starlight caught in a web of despair. My heart twisted. She looked radiant, yet my soul shattered at the sight, a wild mixture of joy for her and anguish for what I feared she might lose. Clutching the fabric of my own dress, I could feel the threads binding me to tradition, to the weight of family and expectation. My fingers trembled, and I could hear my own heartbeat, a steady drum, a reminder that time was unforgiving, that love and loss often danced on the same razor's edge. Then there was him, Eli. Tall and brooding, with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. His jaw clenched as he stood at the altar, a storm brewing within him. I saw the flicker of doubt cross his face, a shadow that threatened to darken the brightness of this moment. I wanted to scream, to shake him and make him see the truth. But would he hear me? Would he understand the weight of his choice? I had watched him fall in love with my sister, yet I could not ignore the flickers of hesitation, the way he looked at her sometimes as if she were a dream he feared to wake from. I remember the vows. Those sacred words woven with belief, yet anchored by unspoken fears, each I do echoed with the weight of 100 generations. They promised eternity, but I could see the cracks beginning to form, the uncertainties hidden beneath a veil of white roses and lace. The air felt electric, charged with the echoes of joys and sorrows from those who had stood where they stood, and I could almost hear their whispers, a cacophony of hopes and regrets. In the back, Grandma held her breath, her eyes glistening with the weight of time and tradition. She had buried the love of her life more than a decade ago, and I could see her fingers tremble as she clutched her handkerchief, the fabric stained with the remnants of 1,000 tears. I knew her heart bore the scars of a love story unfinished, and still she encouraged us to grasp tightly to the fleeting moments of joy, as if she were trying to pass on her wisdom through the frail fabric of time. Then came the moment, a fleeting pause where everything shifted, when the air felt sharp and alive. Eli's gaze darted to the stained glass window, where colors bathed the altar in hues of regret and longing. Did he see the ghosts of those who had come before? The echoes of laughter and loss that filled the very stones of this sacred place. I felt my heart race as I caught his eye, a silent plea that passed between us, a desperate desire to reveal the truth buried beneath layers of obligation. "I can't," he whispered, the words barely breaking the silence, yet they rang like a death knell in my aching heart. The church bell tolled, each chime like a hammer striking iron, shaping the moment into something unyielding. My sister blinked, confusion dancing in her eyes, sparkling like shattered glass. It was a moment suspended in time, heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. I remember the tears that began to flow, not just from her but from guests who had come to celebrate, whose lives had been woven into this tapestry of love that now threatened to unravel. The air turned colder, a chill sweeping through the crowd. The wind outside wailed, as if mourning the union that was destined to become something else, something darker. Eli, her voice quivered, a fragile thread woven into the fabric of the night. She reached for him, but there was a distance now, an abyss yawning between them, wide and terrifying. My heart sank as I watched him step back, retreating into the shadows, each step heavier than the last. Fingers intertwined, yet their grip weakened, as if the weight of tradition was pulling them apart. I could barely breathe, an ache swelling in my chest as the crowd held its collective breath. I felt the pull of time, dragging at us, reminding us that moments like these could slip through our fingers like grains of sand, never to be regained. And then, the moment shattered like glass. Voices rose in a maelstrom of confusion, the murmur of scandal and heartbreak rippling through the guests like wildfire. My sister stood there, a lone figure caught in the storm, her veil billowing like a ghost behind her. I could see the fragile threads of her dreams unraveling, and I wanted to wrap my arms around her, to shield her from the pain that was about to crash down like a tidal wave. Amid the chaos, I caught Eli's gaze again. It was a storm of emotions, fear, regret, yearning, as he stood on the precipice of a choice that could change everything. I could almost taste the bittersweet flavor of reality creeping in, sour and sharp. What could he say? How could he explain the heart's conflict? The fight between duty and desire, the pull of love against the backdrop of history, so defined yet so fragile. My breath hitched as the clock on the wall ticked, each tick a countdown to a decision that felt like it could fracture not just the ceremony but the very foundation of everything we held dear. I wanted to scream, to break the silence that encased us all. This was not just a wedding, it was a reckoning, a moment alive with implications that wove through the fabric of our lives. The shadows in the church flickered, weaving stories of love and loss, of joy and despair, as if the very walls were alive with the weight of our history. I stood frozen in that moment, heart clenching, breath shallow, knowing that whatever happened next would be etched in our minds forever, a memory that would haunt or heal, a love that would either rise from the ashes or crumble into dust. The world outside faded into a backdrop of noise, a veil lifting, as if waiting for the inevitable. I could feel the pulse of time quickening, and yet, within that breathless silence, I knew that love, like everything else, was as fragile as a petal caught in the wind. And in that moment, as the storm raged on beyond the stone walls, we hovered in uncertainty, suspended between the promise of forever and the haunting whispers of what could never be. The wind howled outside like a creature in pain, each gust a reminder that life in the GER was tethered to the whims of nature. A chill wrapped around me, clawing at my skin, but inside, the air was thick with warmth and the scent of boiled mutton. My mother's laughter, punctuated by the sharp crack of the fire, filled the round space, though it felt distant, like a ghost echoing in a vast emptiness. I stood there, caught in a moment just before everything would shatter. "Zaire," she called, her voice rising over the crackle of the flames. "You'll let the heat out. Close the door." But how could I? My mind was racing, heart thudding, something was coming. I felt it in my bones as surely as I felt the rough wool of my dress against my skin. Outside, the shadows shifted, like they were alive, waiting. I didn't want to turn my back to the GER's threshold, but the warmth of our home was a siren call. My fingers trembled as I grasped the wooden door flap, torn between duty and instinct. "Zaire, please." Her voice sliced through my thoughts. "We need to eat, not freeze." I slammed the door shut, breath hitching in my throat, the fleeting warmth evaporating around me. I remembered the stories, of the dark, stalking the edges of the night, of men who vanished into it, swallowed whole by a world that was both beautiful and terrifying. My heart raced, not because of fear alone but because of the weight of expectation. I wasn't just a daughter, I was to be a wife, and this GER, this humble home, was where my life would unfold. A soft whimper escaped my lips as I helped myself to a steaming bowl of mutton, memories of my father's laughter mingling with the taste of the broth, thick and rich. His absence was a wound so deep, I feared I'd bleed out. I was left with only the spectre of what could have been, a love that never bloomed fully, a man who lived for the hunt but was felled by fate. Shadows danced in the flickering light, and I glanced at my mother, her hand steady, weaving stories of love and loss into the very fabric of our lives. "Zaire, you must be sensible," she murmured, her voice warm but laced with steel. "Life is not always the lovely tale we wish it to be. Sometimes, it's a harsh reality." She stared at me, eyes fierce like a hawk, and I felt the weight of her words pressing down on me. But beneath her strength, I sensed the tremors of fear, the gnawing anxiety that clawed at her heart. What if I was never chosen? What if I remained an unclaimed flower, wilting in the vast steppes of our world? I couldn't bear the thought. I had dreams, vivid and wild, of a man whose laughter would fill the GER with light, of children who'd run barefoot across the grass beneath the endless sky. But those dreams felt like whispers lost in the wind as each day dragged on. Suddenly, a loud bang reverberated through the structure, sending chills racing down my spine. The door frame quaked, and my heart sank into my stomach. The villagers had warned of a raider, a band that swept across the land, consuming everything in their path. My mind flashed to my little brother, Ogi, who was playing outside, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. "Mother!" I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. She rushed to the door, her instincts honed by years of survival, and I followed, my feet moving like lead. My body was a taut string, ready to snap. "Stay close," she hissed, eyes wide with an intensity that mirrored my own. We both knew the stories, the folklore that wrapped around our lives like a scarf, how a single misstep could shatter the tranquility of the GER. Outside, darkness wrapped around us, thick and suffocating. The horizon trembled as shadows approached, figures half-formed, menacing, their intentions obscured. I could barely breathe, a weight pressing down on my chest. My mother's presence was a lifeline, but as she peered into the night, I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes, a crack in her armor. And then I saw him, Ogi, standing tall, a little soldier against the encroaching dark. My heart twisted. "Ogi!" I screamed. "Come back!" His eyes widened as he turned toward me, innocent and unknowing, the world still a playground in his mind. I lunged forward, but my mother's hand caught my wrist, holding me back. "No. You can't." "Not yet." Panic surged through my veins. I felt trapped, a wild creature clawing at its cage, desperate to break free. "He's just a child," I pleaded, but my mother's grip was iron. She understood what I couldn't. Sometimes, you had to sacrifice one to save many. The shadows shifted, louder now, and then I remembered my father's stories of bravery in the face of darkness. "What if they come for us?" I whispered, fear coiling around my throat. "They will not take what is ours," she declared fiercely, though her voice trembled, betraying her resolve. I could see the way the shadows danced closer, how they licked at the edges of our sanctuary. I turned my eyes to the faint light of the fire, its flickering brightness a thin line between our world and the horrors that lurked beyond. I remembered the taste of freedom, the thrill of the chase, the laughter of the herd running wild across the plains. But those memories felt like a dream now, dust settling on forgotten corners. As the shadows loomed, I felt the weight of every moment pressing down on me. The darkness wasn't just outside, it seeped into the cracks of our home, threatening to swallow us whole. My heart raced in frantic beats, the drum of impending confrontation echoing in my ears. And yet, through the haze of fear, a flicker of hope ignited, a fire that refused to die, a promise that whispered of resilience and strength. "Together," I whispered, a vow to myself and to my mother. "We'll stand together." At that moment, I was no longer just a daughter. I was a warrior, a protector. A heartbeat echoed in the darkness, binding us together, a promise that as long as we stood united, no shadow could consume us. I could feel my mother's grip loosen, her trust in me returning. And outside, the wind howled, but within our something fierce began to rise. A fire surged, fueled by love, fear, and an indomitable spirit that could not be extinguished. The night was far from over, but we were ready for whatever came next. The knife clattered to the floor, a metallic screech against the wood that sliced through the air, shattering the quiet of the kitchen. I loomed over the counter, heart pounding, hands trembling, as the smell of simmering spices danced mockingly around me. I had wanted to create something beautiful, a melody of flavors, a feast that spoke of warmth and love. But here I was, on the brink of a disaster, again. I remember the last time I had tried to impress him, the way he looked at me with that smirk, a mix of admiration and pity. I remember how it stung, how fierce the embarrassment burned. "Why can't you just get it right?" The words lingered in the air, a ghost that haunted me. I could feel his presence behind me, an unyielding shadow. I didn't need to turn around to know he was there, arms crossed, patience waning like the waning light of dusk. I had expected him to help, to offer solace, but instead, silence filled the room, as thick and suffocating as the humid air. I took a deep breath, letting the heat of the peppery broth enclose me. I was a master of nothing, cooking, weaving, or caring for our child. Each task felt monumental, a Sisyphean struggle. I remember the look in his eyes when I brought our daughter to him, her tiny fingers gripping his as if she could sense the tension that danced between us. I remember his smile, the way it faltered for a split second before he plastered it back on, a cracked facade barely holding it all together. "Can you not hear her?" The words flowed from my lips like venom. The wail of our daughter, piercing and raw, echoed through the house, a stark reminder that love came with its own burdens. Each shriek ignited a fire deep within me, a mix of rage and sorrow. I could almost feel the walls closing in, the very structure of our home becoming a cage, trapping us in a cycle of unspoken thoughts and unresolved conflicts. The loom sat silently in the corner, threads hanging like forgotten dreams. I had imagined weaving tapestries that would tell our stories, but instead, I wove my insecurities into every strand. What was I crafting? A portrait of domesticity weighed down by fear. I could hear the rhythmic thrum of the loom in my mind, a metronome counting the seconds until I would break. I'm trying to make this work," I shouted, the words exploding like fireworks, illuminating the darkness between us. My voice broke, and for a fleeting moment, vulnerability washed over me, raw and naked. I could see the reflection of my desperation in his eyes, the weariness of a man who wanted to support, but felt anchored by my failures. He stepped closer, the distance between us shrinking with every heartbeat. I could see the lines of worry etched on his brow, the way his lips pressed into a thin line. "Trying isn't enough," he said, his voice low, resonating with a quiet storm. My heart twisted, and I hated him for it, yet I understood. I understood the weight each of us carried, the expectations draped over our shoulders like heavy cloaks. There was a moment, a heartbeat suspended in time, where everything stood still. The boiling pot on the stove, the cries of our daughter, the unspoken words hanging in the air. I could almost grasp the chaos swirling around us, a tempest of emotions threatening to drown us both. I wanted to scream, to cry out against the universe for the injustice of it all. But then, the silence broke, and our daughter's shriek intensified, piercing through my heart like a dagger. I rushed to her, cradling her against my chest, feeling the warmth of her small body against mine. I remember how she peered up at me, her eyes wide, filled with the innocence of a life untainted by the burdens of adulthood. In that moment, she was the anchor, tethering me to something real, something pure. I remember when I thought I could do it all, I whispered to her, pressing my forehead against hers. I thought love would be enough. The words were bitter, a confession I had never dared to share. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw a flicker of understanding. She didn't need perfection, she needed me. The loom's threads beckoned from the corner, vibrant colors swirling like memories half-formed. I thought of the stories I could weave, of the laughter that had once filled this home. I thought of the nights spent under starry skies, when the world felt endless and possibilities stretched far beyond the horizon. Do you remember how we laughed? I asked, turning back to him, the anger subsiding like the tide. Do you remember the first time we cooked together? The tension lingered, but now it was laced with a longing for connection, a desperate need to bridge the chasm that had grown between us. He softened, the edges of his frustration blurring. I remember, he said slowly, and I could see the flicker of warmth returning to his gaze. We made such a mess, but it was fun. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, the air escaping my lungs like a whisper of hope. Together, we turned toward our daughter, who had finally quieted, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. She smiled, her little hands reaching for us, and in that moment, I felt the flicker of something mythical, a chance to rewrite our narrative. But the whisper of the loom kept calling, persistent and haunting. I could feel the weight of unfinished stories pressing against my chest. I knew that this moment was not an ending but a transition, a fleeting pause in a lifelong symphony of domestic chaos. The echoes of laughter and tears would continue to swirl around us, a relentless cycle, but perhaps, there was beauty even in the struggle. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the kitchen, I realized that love was less about perfection and more about the rawness of our existence together. I remembered how we had envisioned our lives, a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, laughter and tears. And just like that, the kitchen transformed into a sacred space, filled with the soft glow of hope, a reminder that in the chaos of cooking, weaving, and childcare, we were crafting something profoundly beautiful, something that would endure. I felt the threads of our lives entwining, the past and present merging into a tapestry that told our truth. The knife lay forgotten on the floor, a symbol of our imperfection, a reminder that even in the most chaotic moments, love prevailed in its own messy, heartfelt way. The air was thick, a suffocating haze that clung to the skin like the unrelenting weight of despair. Shadows danced under the pale, sickly light of a dying sun, and the distant sounds of a herd, lowing cattle and the sharp, piercing cries of frightened sheep, echoed like a haunting lullaby. In the heart of it all stood Clara, her hands trembling as she clutched the frayed reins of her horse, each heartbeat a reminder of the stakes. She could feel the ground vibrating beneath her boots, the earth alive with the restless energy of animals demanding freedom, food, and, most poignantly, safety. I remember the first time I held a calf, Clara thought, her mind drifting, but the moment was snatched back by the urgency of the present. A flash of panic seized her, the night was closing in, and with it came the predators, lurking just beyond the realm of sight, hungry and merciless. Her eyes darted to the horizon, where the last rays of daylight bled into the twilight, a crimson warning that the encroaching darkness would soon swallow them whole. "Max, stay close," she shouted, her voice barely rising above the din of the herd. Max, her younger brother, was a stubborn boy, wild and free-spirited, just like the animals they tended. But tonight, he was a tempest of energy, darting between the frightened livestock, laughing as if the chaos were a game. Clara felt the conflicting emotions surge within her: pride, fear, and an overwhelming burden of responsibility. He was too young to understand the danger that lurked in the shadows, too innocent to grasp how fragile their lives had become. As she scanned the herd, Clara caught a glimpse of their mother, Anna, a figure who was simultaneously a rock and a ghost. Anna had once been the heart of their homestead, a beacon of warmth and unyielding strength. But since that fateful day when their father had been taken by sickness, Anna had become a hollow shell of her former self, her laughter replaced by an eerie silence that echoed through the empty barn. Clara knew it was the livestock that kept Anna tethered to reality, the constant rhythm of their needs, the routine of care that fractured the weight of grief into manageable pieces. But tonight, even that routine was threatened. A distant howl sliced through the air, sharp and chilling, and the herd responded with a frenzied panic. Clara's heart raced. The wolves were coming. She felt the tremor in the ground, the beat of 1,000 hooves, each one a reminder of their fragile lives hanging by a thread. "Max," she barked again, her voice rising in intensity. "Get to the barn. Now!" The urgency of her command pierced through his playful demeanor, grounding him in the stark reality of their world. She could see the shift in his eyes, a flicker of fear as the laughter slipped away. That was the moment of awakening, when innocence meets the harsh truth of survival. As they retreated, Clara's mind swirled with memories of days spent in the sun, the warmth of the livestock surrounding them, the way the world felt abundant, alive. "I remember," she whispered to herself, the phrase an incantation, a plea to the cosmos to grant them just a moment longer. She remembered the smell of hay in her hair, the sweet, earthy scent of the barn after a summer rain. But those memories felt like ghosts now, haunting remnants of a life that seemed to slip further away with every howl that echoed from the woods. She could feel Anna's eyes on her back, a weight that threatened to crush them both. Was her mother watching her, or had she already retreated into the shadows of her grief? Clara fought to keep her focus, the weight of the herd under her control, yet the shadows loomed, taunting her with the specter of loss. "Clara!" Anna's voice broke through her thoughts, raw and laced with a desperation Clara had never heard before. "They're getting closer." The urgency of her mother's plea ignited something fierce within Clara. "I know," she shouted back, adrenaline surging through her veins. "We have to move them." With a swift motion, she grabbed Max's hand, pulling him toward the barn, urging the frightened sheep and cattle to follow. Every animal became a piece of her heart, every lowing bellow a plea for survival. The herd surged behind them, a swirling mass of fear and instinct, and for a fleeting moment, Clara felt the wild energy of the animals merge with her own. She was part of them, and they were part of her, a living tapestry woven together by necessity and love. But love alone would not safeguard them. Night fell with a finality that was suffocating, and Clara could sense the shadows closing in, the hungry eyes watching from the tree line. She felt the eyes of the animals upon her, felt their collective fear throbbing in time with her own racing heart. "Clara, I can't," Max stammered, his voice trembling as he stumbled on uneven ground. "Stay with me." "We can't let them see us weak," she urged, her voice fierce, though inside her spirit trembled. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to abandon the burdens of the herd, to escape into the wild night with Maximum. But she couldn't, not now, not ever. They were her family, her lifeline, and she would fight tooth and nail to protect them. As shadows crept along the edge of the barn, Clara's breath hitched, a tight knot of fear forming in her chest. Memories flooded her mind, fragments of a life spent nurturing these creatures, each one a part of her, each one a heartbeat threading through the fabric of their existence. She could hear their breath syncopated, the rhythm of survival, and it echoed her resolve. And that's when she saw them, gleaming eyes in the dark, glimmers of predatory hunger. The wolves were here, the air electric with the promise of confrontation. Clara's heart pounded. She was standing at the precipice of something life-altering, a moment suspended in time. "Get inside!" Clara screamed, a primal roar spiraling into the night. There was no turning back now, no escaping the truth that each heartbeat drew the inevitable closer. Whatever was coming, they would face it together, against the weight of the world and the shadows that threatened to pull them under. The tension hung thick in the air, a heartbeat away from an explosion, as they huddled together, the tension in the barn matching the tension in their hearts. And there, in the fleeting twilight, the importance of livestock became a stark reality. They were more than just animals, they were anchors in a storm-tossed sea, each life a thread in the frayed tapestry of their existence, a bond that could not easily be severed. The wolves were out there, the night unfurling its dark wings like a predator poised for the kill. But so were they, brave children of the earth, holding on to hope, clinging to the flickering flame of survival. The battle had only just begun. The clock ticked ominously in the dimly lit room, its hands moving with a deliberate cruelty as if counting down to an inevitable storm. The air was thick with tension, suffocating, yet electric, each breath felt like a betrayal. I stood there, heart pounding, every beat a reminder of the delicate balance we were all precariously maintaining. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering like the thoughts spiraling in my mind. I remember the night it all spiraled. Lily had stormed in, her face a tempest of rage and hurt. "You can't keep doing this," she screamed, the words slicing through the quiet like a jagged knife. Her eyes were wild, a storm brewing just beneath the surface, threatening to overflow at any moment. I stood frozen, a spectator to the chaos unfolding in front of me, caught between my love for her and my guilt for being the reason behind her anguish. Then there was James, our husband, the center of this twisted vortex. He sat at the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, a man caught in a web of his own making. I could see the signs of strain etched around his eyes, the weight of our shared existence pressing down on him like a mountain. "I didn't mean for it to be like this," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, a fragile echo in the suffocating silence. But how could he not know? The way he loved us both, it was a double-edged sword, cutting into us with every shared kiss and whispered promise. I remember how he held me close, his warmth a fleeting solace against the chill of uncertainty. But with every embrace, I could feel the distance grow between us, like a rift in the fabric of our unorthodox love. Lily's sobs cut through the stillness, sharp and raw. It was a sound that resonated deep within me, a haunting melody of despair. I saw her vulnerability, how she clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, as if she could physically hold onto her sanity. "You think this is easy for me?" she cried, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You think I just want to share you?" In that moment, I felt the weight of her truth, it wrapped around my heart like an iron shackle. The very air crackled with unspoken words, the tension thick enough to strangle any hope of resolution. We were three souls intertwined in a dance of love and heartbreak, a choreography that we never agreed to perform. Each step was laden with unexpressed fears, whispered secrets, and the echo of what could have been. I remember the way the moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating Lily's tear-streaked face, casting her in a ghostly glow. It was beautiful and tragic, like a painting that captured both joy and sorrow in a single brush stroke. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking like glass. "I won't be a second choice." With those words, the ground shifted beneath me. I felt the world tilt, gravity losing its hold, and I was left grasping at nothingness. James looked at me, his eyes pleading for understanding, for a way to patch the gaping wound that was threatening to tear us apart. But could love survive this kind of fracture? Could we mend what was never meant to be whole? I remember the night spent lying awake, the silence screaming louder than our words ever could. The shadows on the walls whispered tales of jealousy and longing, of two women sharing a man whose heart was stretched thin. Every tick of the clock echoed our unspoken fears, each second morphing into a question: how much can one heart hold? And then, just as the tension peaked, a moment of stillness fell over us, like the calm before an impending storm. I glanced at James, his expression a mix of anguish and determination. "We need to talk," he said, the resolve in his voice cutting through the turmoil. Lily's breath hitched, and I could feel the weight of her gaze. "What is there left to say?" she responded, bitterness lacing her words. "You've already made your choice." Her pain hung heavy in the air, palpable, like a specter that refused to depart. I could see the flicker of hope in her eyes, fighting desperately against the creeping dread that wrapped around her heart. It was a battle we fought silently, a war of emotion spilling over into every conversation, every touch, every lingering glance. I felt my heart shatter and reform, an endless cycle of love and loss, of desire and despair. The complexity of our lives was insurmountable, a tangled web of affection and resentment. As I watched them, I felt the weight of their struggles seep into my bones. I was not just an observer, I was a participant in this chaotic love story where no one emerged unscathed. "Maybe there's a way," James began, his voice a tremor of hope. But before he could finish, the tension exploded, a volcano of emotions bursting forth. "No!" Lily shouted, her voice raw with anguish. "You can't fix this. We're breaking." There it was, an undeniable truth laid bare, a wound exposed. I felt the air thicken with tension, shadows coiling tighter around us. The room vibrated with the weight of our fears, our hopes, and the ghosts of dreams unfulfilled. Every heartbeat echoed our desperation, a plea for resolution that felt forever out of reach. And so we stood, three souls locked in a dance of despair and desire, the tapestry of our lives woven together in a pattern of heartbreak and longing. Each moment thick with intensity, each breath heavy with unspoken words. The night stretched on, a blur of emotion swirling around us, propelling us toward an inevitable confrontation where love and sacrifice would collide. Every tick of the clock loomed ominously, a countdown to the moment when the dam would finally break, unleashing the torrent of emotions we had held at bay for far too long. Each second felt like an eternity, and in the suffocating silence, we prepared to navigate the storm that threatened to consume us all. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of despair, every breath a reminder of the chaos that engulfed the city. I stood on the threshold of our crumbling home, trembling hands clutching the wooden doorframe, the splintered edges biting into my palms. In the distance, the unmistakable echo of cannon fire shattered the fragile silence, and each blast woke the ghosts of my anxiety. I remember the day he left, kissed me with the warmth of a sun that felt so distant now. Just a month, he had promised, those words heavy and haunting, wrapping around my heart like a noose. I remember the look in his eyes, brimming with hope, yet glistening with the uncertainty that loomed like a shadow over us. I wanted to be brave, but every ticking second felt like a dagger in my chest, twisting deeper with each explosion that rocked the ground beneath my feet. My heart raced, a wild animal trapped in a cage of dread. I couldn't afford to break, not now. I had to be strong for him. I had to be his anchor in this storm. I remember the faces of other wives, mothers, daughters, all gathered in that dimly lit square, their eyes glistening with unshed tears. We were warriors, yet our battleground was a world turned upside down by war. They clutched their children, cradling them like fragile treasures, and I had no child to hold, only the spectre of loss whispering sweet nothings of what could have been. "Where is he?" I murmured into the night, the stars above like a disinterested audience. I imagined him in the trenches, mud caking his uniform, every heartbeat a pulse of survival. Somewhere, he was fighting, and here I was, fighting my own war against the encroaching despair. I had dreams once, dreams of laughter and warmth, of a family gathered around a table, sharing stories and bread. But those dreams faded like smoke in the wind, replaced by the cold, hard reality of missing letters and haunted silence. Each one was a promise unfulfilled, a reminder that I was left holding the pieces of a life shattered by choices made in haste, decisions dictated by a madness I couldn't comprehend. Then there was Clara, my best friend, her eyes pools of sorrow that mirrored my own. "He'll come back," she'd say, clinging to hope like a candle flickering in the dark. But I saw the cracks in her facade, the way her laughter was tinged with desperation, her smiles fleeting, like dandelion seeds caught in a gust of wind. We needed each other, but the weight of our shared burdens threatened to crush us both. "Do you think they can hear us?" I asked her one evening as we sat on the worn steps of my porch, the night buzzing with the sounds of distant chaos. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw a spark of something, fear, or maybe understanding. "They're fighting for us," she replied, but her voice wavered, an echo of doubt. I could taste the salt of my own tears, the bitterness of uncertainty hanging in the air like dense fog. Did the soldiers know the depth of our sacrifices? Did they feel the empty spaces we filled with unspoken prayers? Every night, I lit a candle, placing it in the window, a beacon of love flickering against the encroaching darkness. I would whisper his name into the silence, hoping the winds would carry it to him, hoping the universe would conspire to bring him home. I remember climbing into bed alone, the sheets cold and empty, a gaping void where he should be. The shadows danced on the walls, flickering like memories, taunting me with fragments of laughter, of warmth that felt so far away. But I had to keep moving. I had to keep fighting my own battle. I volunteered at the makeshift hospital, where the air smelled of antiseptic and despair. I bandaged wounds that were more than flesh deep, each person a story, each injury a testament to a life disrupted. There was Tom, who lost his leg yet spoke of returning to his family, of rebuilding a life that felt irreparably broken. There was Sarah, her baby girl cradled against her chest, both seeking solace in each other's warmth amidst the encroaching shadows. "Tell them I love them," one soldier whispered, his voice a ghost of a man, already fading into oblivion. "Tell them I'd fight for them again." I choked back tears, my heart splintering for every word unspoken, for every life lost to this cruel jest of fate. Every day was a battle against the gnawing fear that he had become another name in the obituary columns, another ghost haunting my dreams. I remember the clenching of my stomach, the way I could barely swallow as I waited for news, any news, even if it meant shattering my heart into a million pieces. I clung to hope like a lifeline, refusing to let despair drown me. I wrote him letters that I never sent, pouring my heart onto the pages, sprinkling them with words of courage and love, lying about the mundane details of life that felt like they belonged to someone else. I filled those letters with laughter, with the mundane, how the cat had knocked over a vase, how the sun had shone through the cracked window, casting stripes of light like a spotlight on my misery. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He was a ghost but a tangible one, alive in my heart, a flame that refused to flicker out. I remember Clara's voice, always urging me to run outside, to feel the sun on my skin, the wind in my hair, as though those simple pleasures could anchor me to a reality that felt increasingly distant. "Breathe," I whispered to myself. "Just breathe." But breaths turned to gasps and gasps to sobs when the nighttime silence became deafening, the world around me closing in like a vice. And yet, I stood there, every heartbeat a drum urging me to hold on, to keep that candle lit, to keep hoping against hope. Then one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in hues of crimson and gold, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, hesitant yet determined. My heart raced, a wild rhythm of anticipation as the door creaked open. And in that moment, time stood still, the universe holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable collision of dreams and reality. I remember every heartbeat, every breath, every single tear that had fallen in his absence. I could feel the world falling away and, for that brief instant, the chaos outside faded into a mere whisper, leaving only the raw ache of longing and the promise of reunion pulsating in the stillness. It was a moment suspended in time, a fragile thread connecting the past and the present, filled with the weight of sacrifice, the bittersweet taste of hope, and the indomitable spirit of love that transcends even the darkest of wars. The night was a cloak of black satin, heavy with the weight of secrets. The only sound was the crackling of the fire, flickering shadows dancing on the yurt walls, where the women whispered. Their voices held the tension of a taut string, ready to snap. I was there, crouching among them, my heart hammering like a war drum, every beat pulsing with uncertainty. The air smelled of sheep wool and smoke, a strange comfort in the grip of fear. I remember the moment vividly, the frightened eyes of Kira, her hands trembling as she clutched a wooden spoon, the only weapon she could wield against the encroaching darkness. She was always so vibrant, a spark of laughter, but tonight, fear had hollowed her out. "What if they come for us?" she whispered, her voice barely above the crackle of the fire. I wanted to tell her that we were safe, that the wild horses outside were just horses, not harbingers of doom, but the truth clawed at my throat like a ravenous beast. Next to her was Yulin, her presence a fortress of resolve, yet even she wore the shadows of doubt. I could see the conflict warring within her, a mother's heart battling against a warrior's pride. Life had sculpted her into a fierce protector, yet here she was, crumbling under the weight of uncertainty. "We will not be taken," she said, her voice rising above the crackle, a fragile echo of strength. "We are kin. We are a network." But even as she spoke, I felt the cracks in her armor, the flicker of fear beneath her bravado. I remember when kinship was a concept wrapped in warmth, a blanket on long winter nights. Now, it felt like a noose, tightening with every shadow that flickered just beyond the firelight. The women of our community, bound by blood and strife, were both my solace and my prison. Their laughter was a melody laced with heartache, their smiles a facade. Every shared glance told a story of struggle and survival that echoed through the ages, a rhythm as ancient as the mountains themselves. I could feel the weight of their stares upon me. They were counting on me, hoping I would conjure some magic, some insight into the chaos that threatened to consume us. But all I could offer was my fear, a trembling offering swallowed by the night. "What if we leave?" I suggested, my voice trembling as it drifted into the dark. The silence that followed was a knife, sharp and unwelcome. They all turned to me, eyes wide, holding their breath as though I had suggested we fly. Run? And leave everything behind? Kira's voice cracked, a fragile string breaking. The horses? The children? She clutched her son's tiny blanket, a lifeline of warmth in the cold grip of reality. Yulin's hand fell heavily on my shoulder. "We cannot abandon this place," she said, her voice a grave tone that resonated in the marrow of my bones. "This is our home. It is our blood." The intensity of her gaze was both a comfort and a weight. She was a shield, yet in that moment, I felt like a coward behind her strength, paralyzed by the thought of loss. The night stretched on, an endless expanse of uncertainty. Outside, the wind howled like a creature in agony, a warning that reverberated through the earth itself. I thought of the men, fathers, husbands, brothers, who roamed the plains, hunting for glory but returning with scars and ghost stories. What did it mean to be a woman in a world so merciless, where the spirit of the land could shift like quicksand? I thought of the stories they told us, the legends of women who rose against the tides, who carved their names into the stone of history. But those were stories, nothing more than whispers in the wind. The tangible reality was sitting here, heart racing, dread pooling like ice in my veins. "What will we do?" I asked, voice trembling with the weight of impending doom. Kira's gaze hardened, a steel resolve igniting in her eyes. "We will stand." The words unfurled like a wild banner caught in the storm. In that moment, I remembered the power of community, the fierce bond that tethered our lives together. We were woven like the threads of a tapestry, each story, each heartbeat a part of the larger whole. As the fire crackled, the shadows grew longer, twisting and contorting like the fears we harbored. Our breath synchronized, a rhythm of survival that pulsed through the yurt, binding us together against the encroaching darkness. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on us, each woman a vessel of ancient strength. And then, as if summoned by our shared determination, something shifted. The air grew electric, a charged tension that crawled along my skin. Shadows at the edge of the firelight moved, and for a terrifying heartbeat, I thought the nightmares had come to life. But it was just the wind, howling through the gaping cracks of our world. It was a reminder of everything we stood to lose, everything that shimmered like a distant star yet felt so close, so palpable. "I remember," Yulin said softly, her voice a balm against the chaos. "I remember when we danced under the moonlight, when laughter filled the air like music." As her words wrapped around me, I remembered too, the joy, the unity, the sacred bond of kinship that thrummed beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. The fire blazed brighter, igniting a fierce resolve within us, pulsing with the heartbeat of the earth itself. In this moment, we were warriors, mothers, sisters, guardians of a legacy stretching beyond the horizon. I felt the heat of their resolve, a fire kindling deep within me. We were not just women, we were a force, a tempest rising against the storm. And as the night deepened, I understood the truth of our existence, that within this fragile circle of kinship lay an unbreakable spirit, a network of women ready to face whatever darkness dared to encroach. Together, we would rise, our voices entwined, a battle cry against the silence. But the shadows loomed, and the night whispered promises and threats in equal measure. As the fire crackled, I held my breath, teetering on the edge of dread and defiance. The confrontation was coming, the test of our bonds, and I could feel it coiling in the air like a serpent ready to strike. The moment was upon us, and as the wind howled, I knew this was only the beginning. The darkness might come for us, but we would not yield. We were kin, bound by the weight of our stories and the strength of our hearts, ready to face whatever the night had to offer. The night air was thick with the scent of ash and desperation, curling around the flickering flames like a lover's caress, whispering secrets of the past. Alt and I stood frozen at the entrance of the yurt, heart pounding like a war drum, her every breath caught in a snare of panic. Outside, chaos erupted, the clash of voices, the cries of women torn between loyalty and despair echoing across the barren steppes. The shadows danced, long and twisted, as if mocking the fear that wrapped around her throat like a noose. I remember the first time I felt the weight of the sky. Alt and I murmured, her voice trembling like the feeble light before her. The stars looked down, watching, judging. The night had held promises once, of laughter and warmth. But now, it felt like a dark shroud, a reminder of everything she held dear, hanging by a thread. Her husband, Batir, had been called to war again, the drums of battle summoning him as they always did, and she was left to face the encroaching darkness alone. Mothers say the spirits of our ancestors guide us, whispered Beta, her sister-in-law, emerging from the shadows, eyes wide, reflecting the firelight like shards of broken glass. She clutched a talisman, an amulet, worn and cracked, a piece of their mother's heart. But what if they lead us into the grave? The question hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken fears. Alt and I turned, the weight of her sister-in-law's gaze pressing against her chest. Beta had always been the fragile one, fragile like the bones of birds, always believing in the whispers of the spirits. You cannot lose faith, Alt and I, she insisted, clutching the amulet to her chest as if it were a lifeline. Our men fight for us. They protect our children, our homes. But even as she spoke, doubt seeped into her voice like ink spilling across parchment. I remember, Alt and I said, the last time he returned. How he held me, how the scent of smoke and blood mixed together, an unholy perfume. She couldn't shake the memory, a spectre that haunted her sleepless nights. Batir was a warrior, yes, but he was also a man. A man who could be broken, a man who could die. Do you think the spirits care? Beta's voice broke the silence, sharp and jagged. They don't feel our pain. They don't know what it is to watch your husband march into the night, knowing he may never return. The fire crackled, a mocking laughter echoing in the dark, as it flickered like the shifting allegiances they were all forced to navigate. Outside, the wind rose, a mournful howl that carried the cries of lost souls. Alt and I felt it in her bones, a chill that crept into her heart and settled there, heavy and unyielding. She could see the shadows of women gathering around the fire, their faces illuminated by the flames, etched with fear and defiance. They were all wives, mothers, daughters, bound by a thread of shared fate, yet each holding a dagger of solitude, guilt, and dread. I am tired of praying, Alt and I confessed, her voice barely a whisper, but it hung in the air like a prayer gone unanswered. What good are prayers when the spirits turn a blind eye? The night swallowed her words, but the air crackled with unspoken truths, truths that twisted like the smoke that rose from the flames. Then what would you have us do? Beta challenged, her hands trembling around the amulet. Stand idle? Accept our fate. The firelight threw wild shadows across her face, her features shifting as if caught in a nightmare. We must believe. We must fight for our faith, for our men, for our children. Alt and I looked into her sister-in-law's eyes, searching for hope where despair had taken root. But what if faith is a lie? It slipped from her lips like poison. What if the spirits are just ghosts of the past, wandering in an empty eternity? The truth hung between them, a silence thick and suffocating. They were trapped in a web of despair, each thread woven by the hands of a cruel fate. Alt and I could hear the drums of war in the distance, a relentless beat that pulsed through the ground beneath them, a heartbeat of something dark and consuming. I remember, she said, her voice breaking, the night before Batir left for the last battle. The stars were bright, mocking me with their beauty. I thought, perhaps, they held the answers. But now. Beta pressed, eyes wide, hungry for resolution, for connection, for something more than just survival. Now the darkness calls. Now the night haunts me with promises of loss. Altenai's heart raced, a frantic rhythm that matched the war drums echoing from afar. She felt the spirits of her ancestors swirling around, watching, waiting. Their presence was an oppressive weight, urging her to choose between faith and despair. Somewhere in the distance, a woman screamed, a piercing wail that cut through the tumult like a knife through flesh. Altenai flinched, the sound reverberating in her bones. It was a reminder, life was fragile, moments fleeting like the glimmer of the stars above. "Beta," she said, her voice lowering to a near whisper, "what if we lit a fire for the spirits? Perhaps if they see us, they will guide our men home." Beta nodded, resolve blooming like a wildflower in the cracks of despair. Together, they gathered dried herbs and salt from their modest stash, each movement heavy with the weight of their unspoken fears. The flames danced higher, greedily consuming the offerings, sending sparks into the night sky like prayers escaping the cages of their hearts. As the fire blazed, Altenai closed her eyes, breathing in the sense of her heritage, the sweet bitterness of cedar, the sharp tang of the smoke. This was their act of defiance. This was their rebellion against fate, against a world that sought to shatter them. But deep within, beneath the flickering shadows, a darkness loomed, a whisper of dread that wouldn't die. What if our cries go unheard? Altenai thought, the fear coiling around her heart like a serpent. What if the spirits are deaf to the cries of their daughters? The fire roared, the shadows danced menacingly, and the night sang its haunting lullaby. Altenai felt the weight of the cosmos pressing down on her, a reminder of the battles fought not only on the steppes but within the very souls of every woman who had ever loved, lost, and prayed beneath the vast expanse of the Mongolian sky. In that moment, Altenai knew she was not alone. They were all bound by the strings of their beliefs, woven in a tapestry of pain and hope, fear and defiance. As the fire cracked and spat, she felt the pulse of life surge through her veins, a connection to every woman who had ever stood at the threshold of despair, heart pounding against the weight of the night. She would fight, she would pray, and she would believe, not just for herself, but for all of them, for the spirits that guided them through the darkness. And so, the night wore on, a tapestry of shadow and flame, the whispers of the past mingling with the cries of the present, all trapped in a dance as old as time itself, of love, loss, and the eternal search for hope. The classroom was silent, save for the furious scratching of quills against parchment, a sound that echoed through the cold, stone walls like the last heartbeat of a dying man. In that claustrophobic air, tension twisted tighter, palpable and suffocating. I remember the way Clara's fingers trembled as she wrote, the ink splayed across her page like the blood of the wounded, stories spilling in chaos. Her eyes were wild, glazed with fear and desperation, as though she were trying to capture knowledge that slipped through her fingers like grains of sand. I remember the clock on the wall, a relic, rusted and stubborn, ticking down the seconds, each tick a metronome of dread. It reminded me of the old tales my grandmother told, where time was a thief, stealing away moments that could never be reclaimed. Clara's face was illuminated by the flickering light of a single, guttering candle, shadows dancing across her cheeks like specters of doubt. Every stroke of her quill seemed to scream, "This matters." Across the room, Thomas sat hunched over, the weight of his past pressing down on him like an iron shroud. He had been so much more than the boy who once laughed under the vast, blue sky. Now, he was a thief of knowledge, always reaching for what would never belong to him, his heart a raging tempest as he wrestled with the ghosts of his ancestors. "I'm not like them," he whispered, though no one dared to respond. The words hung in the air, dripping with a mixture of shame and defiance. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood red and bruised purple, a grotesque reminder of the battles we waged in the name of learning. As the shadows lengthened, they mirrored the weight of our struggles. Knowledge had become a battlefield, and we were soldiers, ill-prepared and terrified, yet unwilling to lay down our arms. "Do you think they'll come for us?" Clara's voice trembled, breaking the silence, slicing through the tension like a knife. I could see in her eyes the flicker of hope battling against despair. "What if we fail? What if this is all for nothing?" I wanted to tell her that failure was not an option, that the traditions of our forebears coursed through our veins like wildfire, but the words caught in my throat. I could feel the weight of my own insecurities pressing down, a suffocating fog that wrapped around me, squeezing tighter with every breath. "Remember the tales," I finally managed, my voice almost a whisper. When the world fell apart, they turned to knowledge. They turned to education. It was our only weapon. But even as I spoke, doubt gnawed at me. Were these words mere echoes of a time long past, or could they light a path through our darkness? The candle flickered again, casting long shadows as the room shuddered in a gust of wind. Outside, the trees whispered secrets into the night, a language I could not decipher, yet it felt familiar, like a lullaby of forgotten dreams. I thought of the elders, their weathered hands imparting wisdom that felt as ancient as the stars. Learning was not just an act of memorization, it was a rite, a dance with tradition that demanded respect and reverence. Yet here we were, clinging to our own fragmented truths, struggling to find meaning in a world that had turned upside down. "Do you think they bathe?" Thomas blurted out suddenly, a wild smile breaking across his face. "Those knights of old, with their grand quests and shining armor? I mean, they must have reeked." Laughter erupted in the room, a brief flicker of light in our darkened existence. It felt absurd, wasn't it? To find joy in the stench of medieval filth? But in that moment, the weight we carried lightened just enough for us to breathe, to remember that life was more than just lessons carved in stone. Yet, beneath the humor, the shadows still lurked. I thought of the ghosts of forgotten knowledge, the whispers of those who had once walked these halls, the weight of their failures and triumphs echoing through time. Every lesson learned was a battle fought, every skill mastered a victory over despair. But with every victory, the fear of losing it all loomed larger, a specter that haunted our very bones. "Is this what it feels like?" Clara said, her voice barely rising above a whisper, her eyes glimmering with unshed tears. To hold so much, yet feel so empty. Her vulnerability was a raw wound, and I felt it deep within me, a reminder that education was never just about rote learning. It was an emotional abyss, a chasm filled with longing, regret, and the lingering fear of inadequacy. I couldn't help but think of the weight of every book, every lesson, every moment spent in pursuit of knowledge. It was a treasure but also a burden. I reached out and squeezed her hand, my heart pounding with the urgency of shared secrets. "We're not empty. We're just unfinished." But in that moment, a distant sound broke through the fragile cocoon we had woven. A rhythmic thud, echoing through the hallways, growing louder, more insistent. It was the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate. The fear surged back, icy and electric, jolting us into reality. "Hide!" I shouted, panic flaring as we scrambled for the shadows, hearts racing like thunder. The door creaked open, and darkness poured in, swallowing us whole. We pressed ourselves against the cold stone walls, breath hitching as the footsteps grew louder, an ominous reminder of the price of knowledge in a world that seemed bent on erasing it. As we waited, heartbeats synchronizing in a desperate dance, I realized that the stories we had been told were not just lessons, they were warnings. The traditions we cherished held both beauty and terror, a reminder that education could ignite revolutions or lead to ruin. In the profound stillness, as the footsteps paused, I felt time stretch like a taut wire, each moment a lifetime, each heartbeat a silent prayer. We were on the precipice of something vast, something terrifying. In that darkness, knowledge flickered like the candlelight, a beacon that promised salvation yet threatened to consume us whole. And as the door creaked open, shadows spilling across the threshold, I knew we were not merely students of history, we were its unwitting players, caught in a dance we could neither control nor comprehend. The air crackled with tension as the confrontation loomed, the lines drawn between the past and the uncertain future. And in that moment, we were left with one undeniable truth: the quest for knowledge was a perilous journey, but one worth every heartbeat, every breath, every tremor of fear. The wind howled through the desolate valley, a wailing ghost whispering secrets of a world turned upside down. In the distance, the silhouette of a rider loomed, a mere shadow against the bone-white sky. The air crackled with anticipation, thick with the scent of smoke and fear. I stood there, heart pounding, as I watched the figure approach, a woman cloaked in furs, her eyes fierce yet haunted, each breath a prayer against the chaos that awaited. Her name was Khartoon, a warrior of the steppes, forged in the fire of the Mongol Empire's relentless march. I remember the stories, the wild nights spent huddled around a fire, listening to the tales of her exploits. "She fights as fiercely as any man," they said, and I believed them, though I also felt the tremor of a deeper truth lurking beneath her strength. Cartoon's hands, calloused from years of wielding a bow, were equally capable of gentleness, cradling her daughter's face in moments of vulnerability. Yet, a storm brewed within her, a tension that threatened to snap like a bowstring pulled too tightly. And then there was Genyo, a girl on the cusp of womanhood, her dreams tangled in the chaos of an empire's rise and fall. I remember the sparkle in her eyes when she spoke of love, the kind that made her heart race like the hooves of the horses that thundered past her home. But in this world, love was a currency of blood, a dangerous gamble. She longed to break free from the chains of expectation, yet each day felt like a suffocating shroud, wrapping tighter around her throat, dimming her spirit. Their lives intertwined, like the braids of a warrior's hair, yet each wore her conflict like a scar. I felt the weight of their burdens as if they were my own, each heartbeat echoing the relentless march of history, the Mongol Empire sweeping across the land like a tidal wave, reshaping the very fabric of existence. Cartoon stood before a gathering of women, her voice rising above the murmurs, each word a battle cry. "We are not merely the mothers of warriors, we are warriors ourselves." The crowd stirred, eyes wide with hope and fear. I could see Genyo in the back, her fingers fidgeting with her shawl, yearning for Cartoon's strength but shackled by doubt. The air vibrated with a tension that felt almost electric, a moment suspended in time, as if the universe held its breath. I remember the stories of women in the old days, bound by tradition, drenched in the shadows of their husbands' victories, but now, change was a fierce wind at their backs. Cartoon spoke of battles won and lost, not just on fields but within the hearts of every woman present. "We must seize our fate," she urged, like a horse galloping toward the horizon. The call rang out, igniting a spark in the depths of Genyo's soul, a flicker of rebellion against the chains that bound her. And yet, with every moment of hope, a darker cloud loomed overhead. I felt it, a chill that crept into the marrow. Rumors of a warlord's return, whispers of bloodshed that threatened their fragile empowerment. Cartoon's eyes darkened, haunted by the specter of their past, where women's voices were silenced in the clamor of swords. "We fight for our children," she said, and I felt the grief in her voice, a mother's heart breaking under the weight of a world demanding sacrifice. Genyo caught her breath, her heart racing with confusion. She wanted to believe, wanted to stand beside Cartoon as a warrior, but the echoes of her mother's voice haunted her, "You are meant to serve, not to lead." The conflict roared within, a tempest threatening to consume her. She was torn between the legacy of subservience and the fierce fire that Cartoon ignited, a choice between love and rebellion that echoed like a drumbeat in her chest. As Cartoon rallied the women, their voices rising like a battle hymn, I could see Genyo slip away, the shadows swallowing her whole. I followed, my heart a lead weight, sensing her desperation. In a hidden grove, she fell to her knees, the earth cool beneath her palms. "What do I want?" she whispered to the wind, a question that seemed to ripple through time. "Do I want to be a warrior, or do I want to be loved?" The dichotomy struck me like lightning, illuminating the night with stark clarity. Cartoon found her there, the fierce warrior transformed into a nurturing spirit. "You are both," she said softly, kneeling beside her, their bodies mirroring the earth, each woman a universe unto herself. "You can wield a sword and cradle a child. You can be fierce and tender." But Genyo's eyes glistened with tears, fear and defiance warring within her. "But what will it cost?" she cried, the weight of the question echoing in the stillness. "What if I lose everything?" The vulnerability cracked through the air, raw and agonizing, and I felt the ground tremble beneath the weight of her truth. Cartoon's expression softened, and in that moment, I understood the profound conflict that bound them, a tapestry woven of strength and fragility, a dance of fear and hope. "Then we fight together," she breathed, the promise hanging in the air like a prayer. As night fell, shadows stretched long, and the moon cast a ghostly light over the valley. The world around them pulsed with the rhythm of change, and I felt the warmth of their bond illuminating the darkness. Cartoon and Genyo stood on the precipice of transformation, each heartbeat a testament to their shared resolve. But the winds of fate were not yet done with them. The distant rumble of horses echoed on the horizon, a harbinger of the impending storm, a reminder that freedom often comes with a price. Their confrontation was near, a reckoning that would shake the foundations of their lives, blood and courage intertwined, the spectre of the Mongol Empire looming large. In that moment, I held my breath, unable to look away from the unfolding tapestry of their lives. The journey ahead was uncertain, but their spirits burned bright, ignited by a fierce determination that could not be extinguished. The night whispered promises, dreams tangled in the vast expanse of the cosmos, and I could feel the pulse of history thrumming through the silence, as if the universe itself awaited their decision. The wind howled like a wounded beast, tearing through the thin fabric of our tent, blurring the line between safety and peril. I remember the first time I felt the cold creep into my bones, an icy finger tracing my spine as shadows danced just outside our flickering firelight. The world around us was a vast, unforgiving expanse, and in that moment, as the storm raged and the horizon vanished, I understood the cruel humor of fate, all our plans laid bare, all our hopes drowned in the relentless howl of nature's fury. Mara clutched her son, Rofi, against her chest, the weight of her love almost unbearable. She whispered to him, her voice a fragile thread woven into the chaos. "Hold tight, my brave boy, hold tight." But I could see the doubt flickering in her eyes, a storm more turbulent than the one outside. Rofi had always been her heart, and now, as the wind screamed and the twisted branches clawed at the night sky, I saw that heart teetering on the edge of despair. "What if the storm takes us?" he asked, his small voice quaking like the ground beneath us. "Then we'll fly," she replied, but her smile trembled. It was a promise that felt hollow in the face of the raging tempest. I wanted to believe her, to believe that we could soar above it all, defying the elements that sought to lay waste to our lives. But the truth was stark, gnawing at my insides like hunger. Here we were, nomads in a world that didn't care for our dreams, our struggles. Here we were, lost in the chaos. I remember the first time Mara and I met, two souls adrift in a sea of uncertainty. She had an energy that rippled through the air, drawing me in, but even then, there was a shadow behind her laughter. "You think this is freedom?" she had asked me once, staring into the flickering flames. "Every step is a fight. Every day is a gamble." I had laughed it off, but the truth had lodged itself in my throat like a splinter, sharp and relentless. We had traveled together, weaving through deserts and mountains, chasing horizons and sunsets, all the while running from something we couldn't name. And now, the storm was a reminder of our insignificance, a cruel reality check against the vast and indifferent cosmos. The wind howled again, but it wasn't just the weather, it was the echoes of our fears, the swirling doubts that encased us like a prison. Rofi's small hand squeezed Mara's as the tent swayed, and in that moment, I felt a wave of protectiveness wash over me. This child, this innocent soul, didn't deserve to inherit the burdens that we carried. I thought of the times I had let them down, when I should have fought harder against the tide of despair or shielded them from the harshness of our existence. The memories crashed into me like waves against a jagged rock, relentless and unforgiving. "Mara, we have to move," I said, my voice barely above the roar of the storm. "We can't wait for it to pass. We need to find shelter." Her eyes widened, a mixture of fear and determination reflected back at me. "And leave this? Our home." "Home." I laughed bitterly, the sound swallowed by the wind. "Home is a myth, Mara. It's a ghost, a city we'll never find. We need to survive." The weight of those words hung between us like a fragile crystal, ready to shatter at the slightest breath. Rofi whimpered at the sound of my voice, and something inside me twisted. I didn't want to scare him, didn't want him to see the desperation clawing at my heart. "Listen to me, buddy," I knelt down, meeting his wide, frightened eyes. "We're going to be okay. We'll find a way." But the truth was, I didn't know if we would. I didn't know if we could run fast enough to escape the treacherous grip of our circumstances. The storm rumbled on, relentless, a dark symphony of nature's fury. I could feel the world closing in, the walls of our existence constricting, but I also felt something else, a flicker of resolve igniting within me. I remembered the stories Mara used to tell Rofi about the stars. "They are our ancestors, watching over us," she would say, voice soft yet fierce against the biting winds. "Do you think they're watching us now?" Rofi asked, eyes shimmering like the distant constellations. Of course, they are, Mara said, forcing a smile that cracked under the weight of her fear. They are smiling, cheering us on. But the stars felt impossibly far away, mere specks against the vast tapestry of the universe. I stared into the depths of the night, searching for answers, for guidance. But all I found was the echo of our struggles, the shadows of our past. As the winds howled and the rain pounded against the canvas of our lives, I knew we had a choice. To stay and succumb to the elements, or to rise and confront them head-on. I looked at Mara, saw the fire in her eyes flickering, and I felt the weight of our lives pressing down on my shoulders. We were a family, no matter how fragile. We were each other's lifeline in this merciless world. Let's go, I said, a newfound resolve pulsing through me. Together. And as we stepped into the storm, I felt the first real surge of hope. In the harshness of our existence, we found our strength. In the cacophony of chaos, we recognized the beats of our hearts, each thump a reminder that we were alive, that we were fighting, that we were daring to chase the impossible. But that was just the beginning. The storm raged on, and so did our journey. We were nomads, yes, but we were also survivors, caught in the tempest of our fears, our dreams, our very souls entwined in a relentless dance with the unforgiving world. Would we find shelter? Or would we be lost to the winds? The answers lay ahead, shrouded in shadows, waiting for us to unravel them one heartbeat at a time. I remember the moment the sky cracked open, unleashing torrents of rain like arrows piercing the earth. A storm surged through the steppes, fierce and unrelenting, a chaotic symphony that matched the turmoil in our hearts. I was there, huddled beneath a tattered yurt, the wind howling like a banshee, when my sister-in-law, Beta, stumbled in, breathless and wild-eyed. "They're coming," she panted, the words barely escaping her lips before the darkness closed in around us, thick and suffocating. Beta had always been the bravest among us, her spirit like the unyielding mountains that framed our lives. Yet in that moment, I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes, a reflection of the dread that coursed through our veins. The men had gone, leaving us to fend for ourselves in a world that thrived on violence and chaos. My heart thudded painfully against my ribcage, each beat a reminder of the weight of our reality. "Where is my son?" I choked out, the words tasting of ash. My hands trembled, clenching the fabric of my worn dress. The loss was a ghost that haunted me, an ever-present phantom that lurked in the shadows of every thought. I was a mother, yet helpless, my child's laughter now a distant echo, swallowed by the merciless winds of fate. "They took him," Beta said, her voice a whisper, as if saying it louder might conjure the dark figures that had invaded our lives. My heart splintered, shards of grief piercing through the fabric of my existence. I thought of the playful boy who once danced beneath the sun, his laughter a soothing balm against the harshness of life. I thought of the way he would chase after the wild horses, unbridled and free. Now, he was lost, swept away into a world of uncertainty. "Hold on," I said, my voice wavering but resolute. "We will find him." The words felt flimsy in my mouth, like a prayer offered to a deaf sky. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was a lie I told myself to stave off the suffocating weight of despair. Beta nodded, but her gaze drifted, haunted and far off, as if she were already grappling with the ghosts of our past. We ventured out into the storm, the rain cascading over us like a shroud. I could feel the earth trembling beneath my feet, as if it shared in our fear. Every drip, every gust of wind was a reminder of the fragility of our lives. I could see the shadows lurking in the distance, the marauders, the predators of our existence, and I felt the primal instinct to survive clawing at my insides. We were wives, mothers, but today we were warriors, our hearts steeled with a ferocity that could shake the heavens. As we moved through the dimness, I caught sight of another figure in the shadows, a woman, her long hair whipping around her face like flames. It was Dolgor, a neighbor, her spirit as wild as the steppe. "Help," she cried, her voice raw, echoing in the tumult. She was clutching a bundle to her chest, a small wail piercing through the storm. "The raiders," I reached out, pulling her close, my heart racing. "What happened?" "They took my husband." Her eyes were frantic, and in them, I saw my own fear reflected back. In that moment, the world shrank to the three of us, united by loss, by pain, by a shared will to survive. We were not just wives, we were sisters in arms, grappling with a fate none of us had chosen. Beta took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "We have to find them together," she said, fierce determination igniting her voice. "No one is left behind." I could hear the thunder rumbling in the distance, a warning bell tolling for the lost and the damned. But in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that resilience coursed through our veins like fire. We might be battered and bruised, but we were not broken, we had each other, and that was enough. As we moved through the twisting paths of our village, I felt the weight of our shared histories, sisters, daughters, lovers living under the shadow of a brutal world. We were marked by pain, but also by a fierce, unyielding strength that pulsed through us, igniting a flame that refused to be extinguished. The night was alive with the ghosts of our ancestors, their whispers guiding us, their stories woven into the very fabric of our existence. And yet, the darkness loomed, heavy and oppressive. I could hear the distant shouts, the clash of steel, the cries of anguish that echoed like a haunting melody in my ears. My heart raced, each beat a reminder that time was slipping away. I could feel the urgency in the air, the electric pulse of desperation. We had to reach them before it was too late. Beta charged ahead, her fierce determination cutting through the shadows. I followed, my pulse quickening, as the adrenaline surged through my veins. I was a mother, a wife, and a warrior, and the weight of those identities pressed against my chest like a mountain. I could not fail them, I would not fail them. Then, a flash of movement caught my eye, a figure darting between the trees. My breath hitched in my throat. Could it be? "Wait!" I shouted, racing after the shadow. My heart pounded in my ears, each step drawing me closer to the unknown. As we closed in, I came face to face with the spectre of my fears. A man, cloaked in darkness, stood before me, the glint of steel in his hand. My body froze, the world narrowing to a single point of focus, him. Behind me, I could hear Beta and Dolgor, their breaths heavy with anticipation. "Let him go," I demanded, my voice shaky but resolute, drawing from the well of courage that had been forged in the fires of our suffering. The man laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed in the storm. "You think you can save him?" And just like that, time stood still. In that heartbeat, I was stripped bare, my fears laid open for the world to see. I didn't know if I could save him, if I could save any of us. All I knew was that I had to try, that I had to fight for each precious life. I remembered the words of my grandmother, her voice etched in my memory, a guiding star in the darkest nights. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. And in that moment, I felt it rising within me, a tidal wave of resilience, strong and unyielding. I took a step forward, my heart pounding with defiance, and I prepared to fight for the future, for my son, for the lives entwined with mine, knowing that even in the face of despair, we would not go quietly into the night. The market square was chaos and beauty, a cacophony of voices colliding like waves crashing against the shore. It was the kind of place where dreams were woven into the fabric of the fragrant spices and vibrant silks, but beneath that surface shimmer lay a tension that could slice through flesh. I stood there, breathless, as the sun bled into the horizon, casting an eerie orange glow on the faces of the crowd, illuminating the fear lurking in their eyes. I could feel the weight of their hopes, the sharp edges of their desperation clawing at my soul. "Raina," a voice pierced through the noise, sending shivers down my spine. It was Marwan, his dark eyes wide, reflecting the fire of both anger and fear. He was always passionate, but today there was a mania about him that made my heart race. "They're coming for us. We can't keep trading with the Eastern merchants, they're poisoning our minds." The words tumbled from him, jagged and raw, like broken glass spilling onto cobblestone. I wanted to tell him that the world was bigger than our small town of Ashara, that every trade was a doorway to another life, another way of thinking. I remember the first time I tasted cinnamon, my mouth bursting with sweetness, my senses dancing. "Marwan, you can't what?" he interjected, a wild desperation in his voice. "Can't see that their ideas are seeping in, spreading like a plague? We are losing ourselves." His hands clenched into fists, trembling with the weight of his convictions and the fear that shadowed him. I wanted to hold him, to tell him that his passion was beautiful yet dangerous, that souls could be lost in the fog of fear and obsession. But before I could speak, a group of men surged into the square, their shouts echoing like thunder. They wore dark robes, their faces obscured, and in their hands, they clutched crude wooden staffs, weapons of authority and fear. Their presence sent chills racing down my spine. I glanced at Marwan, whose face had turned pale, and in that instant, I knew we stood on the precipice of something monumental. I could almost hear the clock ticking, each second laden with the weight of our choices, echoing the heartbeat of a world on the brink of transformation. Trade was never just about goods, it was an exchange of life and breath, ideas and fears, and now, those ideas were no longer just whispers. They were screams. In the shadows of the market, I caught sight of Layla, her eyes glistening with tears, a reflection of my own turmoil. She was a healer, the kind of woman who could soothe the fiercest wounds with a touch, yet her heart was a battleground. Layla had always walked on the edge of tradition, her curiosity pulling her toward the unknown like a moth to a flame. But today, that flame flickered dangerously close to destruction. "What if they're right?" she whispered, her voice quaking like autumn leaves. "What if the Easterners bring ruin?" "Ruins can be rebuilt," I replied, though even I felt a tremor of doubt tugging at my resolve. "But if we shut the door on them, we close off the light." "I remember the stories my grandmother told me," Layla said, her gaze lost in the distance, the weight of history pressing on her. "About a time when fear ruled, and the only sound was the echo of lost souls." She shuddered, the air grew heavy as memories coiled around us like smoke. "Will we become ghosts in our own lives?" The tension in the square thickened, choking the laughter and songs, wrapping us in a shroud of dread. The men with the staffs marched closer, their intentions clear as the sun's last rays dipped below the horizon. My heart raced, each beat a countdown to an inevitable clash. Marwan took a step forward, his fists still clenched. "We have to fight. We cannot allow them to take our minds, our culture." "Fight," I echoed, fear bubbling in my throat. "Against what?" "The unknown?" "Ignorance is not a weapon, it's a prison." "Prison?" Marwan exploded. "This is our home. Their ideas will unravel everything we are." His voice was raw, scraping against the pain of his convictions, tearing through the fabric of our lives. I wanted to scream, to shake him and show him the beauty in the chaos, the dazzling potential of interaction. I wanted him to understand that trade was not about goods, but about connection, each silk thread woven with stories, each spice carrying the scent of another world. But my words tangled in my throat, heavy with emotion, as the men advanced, shadows lengthening, the atmosphere crackling with tension. And then, suddenly, there was silence. It enveloped the square like a thick fog, pressing in, suffocating. A heavy moment hung between us, the air thick with anticipation. I could see the fear etched on the faces of the townsfolk, their breaths shallow, hearts racing. It was a moment suspended in time, a cosmic pause before the storm. "Enough," came the booming voice of the leader, resonating with authority. "You will choose allegiance or face the consequences. The time for choice has come." I felt the weight of the world shatter against my chest, the gravity of it all pulling me down, clutching at my heart. I looked at Layla, at Marwan, and in their eyes, I saw my own fear reflected back, a fear of losing our identity, our essence, our right to exist. But then I remembered the taste of cinnamon, the warmth of laughter shared over meals, the feeling of hands held tight in moments of uncertainty. "What if we embrace them?" I urged, my voice trembling. "What if we learn from them instead of fighting? We can't let fear dictate our path." Marwan shook his head, the fire in his eyes flickering. "And what if that path leads us to ruin?" I held his gaze, desperation clawing at my insides. "But what if it leads us to freedom?" A heartbeat passed, another breath taken, and in that charged silence, I felt the tremors of our choices ripple through the square. The men stood like statues, their presence vast and unyielding, but within us surged a storm of possibility. We were bound by fear, but also by hope, the flicker of light that danced in the dark. And then, just like that, the moment exploded. Like a star collapsing in on itself, the crowd surged forward, cries of defiance mingling with the shouts of authority. We were caught in the cyclone of humanity, raw, unfiltered emotion swirling around us. As chaos erupted, I realized this was not just a battle of ideas, it was a fight for our very souls, our identities, our place in a world that was shifting beneath our feet. I felt the pulse of history thrum in my veins as we charged forward, together, hearts racing, ready to confront the ghost of fear. In that moment, the air crackled with energy, and I understood, this was just the beginning, and though we stood on a knife's edge, we were alive, resolute, and ready to embrace the storm. No matter the outcome, we would never again be the same. The shadows loomed, but so did the dawn, both were inevitable, intertwined like fate and choice, echoing through the ages. The clock ticked like a metronome, each second an echo in the cramped kitchen. Rose stood at the counter, knuckles white, gripping the edge as if it were a lifeline. The air thick with the smell of burnt toast and bitterness, memories wrapped around her like the worn shawl draped over her shoulders. "I remember," she whispered, but the words were swallowed by the silence, punctuated only by the beat of time. Maggie, her granddaughter, paced behind her, a storm brewing in her chest. 19, restless, she carried a weight that felt like the world. "You never listen. You never even try to understand." The words lashed out, sharp as the knife glimmering in the sink, a reminder of the tension lurking in every corner of the room. Rose turned slowly, her face a map of age and sorrow, deep lines carved from years of sacrifice. "And what do you know of understanding, dear?" Each syllable was heavy with the ghosts of their family, lives lived in the shadows of regret and unfulfilled dreams. "You think you have it all figured out?" Maggie's breath hitched, a painful pause filled with unresolved anger. She wasn't just fighting with her grandmother, she was battling the weight of generations, the expectations suffocating her like the humidity of a summer's day. "I'm not you, Grandma. I don't want to end up like you." The words burst forth, raw and unfiltered. The silence that followed was a palpable thing, wrapping them both in a cocoon of unspoken truths. It felt like a funeral, buried beneath the weight of unacknowledged love. Rose's heart thrummed in her chest, memories flooding in, her own mother, a spectre of despair, reminding her of dark choices and a life of dreams deferred. "You think this is all there is?" she murmured, her voice trembling. "You think the past doesn't breathe within you?" Maggie clenched her fists, the walls closing in. "I want to break free. I want to be more than just a burden. More than just your legacy." The words hung in the air, a tempest of rebellion and defiance. But the truth was darker than either could bear. Legacy wasn't just a gift, it was a chain, heavy and unyielding. Rose saw herself in Maggie, the fire, the fierce determination, and it scared her. She remembered her own mother, cutting vegetables with the same ferocity, the same longing for something more. "I was a girl once," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I dreamed of seeing the world, of not being confined to this life." The words cracked like glass. Maggie felt a fissure open within her, a dark pit swirling with doubt. "Then why didn't you?" The question hung, a challenge, a plea. "Why did you let life turn you into this?" Rose closed her eyes. "Because I didn't know how to fight. I didn't know I could." The admission was a knife to the gut, revealing the vulnerability hidden beneath layers of strength. It was the weight of regret, the burden of choices made, and the heavy cloak of familial duty that had pinned her down like a moth on a board, a cautionary tale. Their eyes met, and in that connection, something shifted. The kitchen, with its peeling wallpaper and faded photographs, became a battleground of unfulfilled potential. Each heartbeat echoed louder than the last, a cacophony of fear, love, and desperation. "I don't want to become you," Maggie said, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the remnants of her grandmother's past. "I want to be free to make my own mistakes." Rose's heart broke at the sight of her granddaughter, the innocence shattered by the weight of expectation. "But mistakes are inescapable, my love," she said, stepping closer, the distance between them shrinking like the waning light of day. "They shape us. They are the very fibers of our being." And just like that, the tension crackled, a live wire sparking between them. Maggie felt the constriction around her chest loosen for the first time, the fear of the future melting away under the warmth of understanding. "So what do I do?" she whispered, vulnerability stripping her bare. The moment lingered, fragile as a spider's web, glistening with unspent tears. "You make your own choices," Rose breathed, her voice the softest of caresses. "But remember, my legacy lives in you. You carry every scar, every joy, every mistake we make." In that silence, the weight of time pressed down, heavy and relentless. The wall seemed to pulse, alive with the echoes of their ancestors, the spirits of women who had fought endlessly for their place in this world. Shadows flickered in the corners, whispering tales of hope and despair, of love that endured and pain that festered. Maggie stepped back, the weight of it all crashing down. "But what if I fail? What if I become a ghost of a memory, just like you?" The fear trembled in her voice, a tightrope walk between despair and possibility. Rose reached out, her hands trembling as they clasped Maggie's. "Then you rise again, my girl. Because that is what we do. We rise." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, the world cloaked in twilight, but within the kitchen, something had shifted. The air buzzed with unresolved tension, the kind that could ignite and set the world ablaze, or wash over them like a cleansing rain. The clock ticked on, relentless, as the shadows lengthened. And in that moment, they understood, legacy was not a burden handed down but a choice, a flame that could flicker or blaze, depending on who held it. The weight of their familial history hung between them, electric, waiting for its final spark. Rose and Maggie stood at the precipice, gazing into the abyss of their intertwined fates, each heartbeat a reminder that time was rushing them forward, forcing them to confront the truths they had long buried. And as the clock ticked, the silence swelled, pregnant with the promise of transformation, a cycle yet unbroken, a legacy that would continue to shape them both. The moon hung low in the ink-black sky, a watchful eye casting its silver gaze upon the vast, endless steppe. A gust of wind rustled the tall grass, a haunting whisper that carried the weight of generations. In the heart of this desolation, 3 women stood poised on the precipice of change, their breaths mingling with the cool night air, heavy with unspoken fears and dreams. They were the ghosts of their pasts, shadowy figures caught between the legacy of an ancient world and an uncertain future. I remember the crack of the whip, sharp like a knife, slicing through the night. It echoed in my ears, drowning out the sounds of the distant wolves. Nora stood there, her hands trembling, fingers stained from the dye she'd used to color the wool. "They think we are weak," she whispered, her voice barely audible, quaking like the leaves above, "but we are not." Her defiance hung in the air, a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. Beside her, Amina clenched her jaw, her dark eyes glistening with unshed tears. She was the keeper of family secrets, a burden heavier than stone. "You don't understand," she hissed, voice low and crackling like the fire that warmed the hearth. "They will break us if we let them. Tradition is a noose." The chill of her words sent shivers down my spine. I could feel the weight of history pressing upon her shoulders, the ghosts of mothers and daughters who had fought, struggled, and sometimes perished in silence. And then there was Saran, the dreamer, her heart a wild bird fluttering against the bars of expectation. "We can forge our own paths," she said, her voice filled with an intoxicating mixture of hope and desperation. "The world is changing. We can be more than what they want us to be." The fervor in her eyes was electric, a spark that ignited the night. But the shadows clawed at her words, clawed at their hearts, dragging them back into the suffocating embrace of tradition. I remember the stars, thousands of pinpricks of light scattered across the cosmos, indifferent to our struggles. They laughed silently, mocking us, reminding us of our insignificance. We were 3 women in a vast expanse, each trapped in our own storm, yet somehow drawn together by a shared fate. We were like the wildflowers that pushed through the cracks in the earth, beautiful but fragile, struggling against the weight of the world. A cold wind swept through, bringing with it the scent of rain and something more sinister, a memory. I couldn't shake the image of my grandmother, her hands weathered and worn, the stories of her youth spilling forth like water from a cracked pot. "A woman's place is by her man's side," she had always said, and I can still hear the echo of her voice, steeped in a bittersweet nostalgia. That is honor. But what kind of honor comes from silence? What kind of chains bind the heart tightly enough to suffocate it? Nora broke the silence, her voice a fragile tremor. I refuse to be a shadow, Amina. I refuse to fade into the background of someone else's story. There was fire in her words, a flicker of rebellion, but the weight of tradition clung to her like a shroud. I could see her battling her internal demons, the fear of stepping into the light, the fear of losing everything. Amina's shoulders sagged, the lines of conflict etched deep on her brow. And what if we fail? What if we are left with nothing but dreams that turn to ashes? Her voice cracked, and in that moment, I saw her, the little girl who longed for freedom, but was shackled by the expectations of a past she couldn't escape. Then we will rise from the ashes, Saran said, her voice a fierce whisper. Like the phoenix. But even as she spoke, I could see doubt clouding her bright eyes, the weight of uncertainty pressing against her heart. The possibility of failure was a specter that haunted us all, a ghost that lurked in the shadows of our hopes. The night deepened, and the air grew heavy with unresolved tension. We stood at a crossroads, each path a reflection of our deepest fears. I remember the clock in the village square, its hands frozen in time, a symbol of the stagnation we felt. The tick-tock of its heartbeat echoed in my mind, a reminder that time was slipping away, yet we were still caught in a web of tradition that resisted change. Nora took a step closer to the edge of the cliff, her silhouette stark against the bleak horizon. If we don't fight for ourselves, who will? She cried, the wind whipping her hair around her face, as if nature itself conspired to amplify her defiance. There was a moment, the heartbeat suspended in time, where I felt the world shift beneath us, where possibility glimmered like a mirage. But then came the doubt, creeping in like shadows at twilight. Amina shook her head, her voice raw. You think it's that simple? You think they will let us? She looked at me, desperation swimming in her eyes. I felt my heart race, caught between the burning desire to scream yes, and the whisper of fear that clung to the edges of my mind. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with the weight of our unspoken fears. The night stretched on, and I could almost hear the heartbeat of the earth, the pulse of a culture in transition, a reckoning looming like a storm on the horizon. We were on the edge of something monumental, yet here we were, tethered to the past, grappling with the ghosts that haunted our dreams. I remember the first light of dawn creeping over the vast steppe, illuminating the shadows that had wrapped around us. The air shimmered with possibility, the tension palpable, the world holding its breath. Change was coming, but at what cost? The echoes of our fears danced around us, but within each heartbeat, there was a flicker of hope, a fragile thread that bound us together. As we stood there, united yet divided, the transition into modernity beckoned, a siren song enticing us into the unknown. The shadows of our past clung to us, but the future? It whispered promises of freedom wrapped in uncertainty. And as the sun began to rise, casting golden hues upon the steppe, I realized this was only the beginning. We were but the first notes in a symphony of change, each chord resonating with the pulse of our defiance, the heartbeat of women unwilling to be silenced. The wind screams through the valleys, carrying with it the echo of 1,000 voices lost in history. I stand at the precipice of a cliff, heart racing, pulse quickening, the icy fingers of fear tightening around my throat. Below, the Mongol steppes stretch endlessly, cloaked in an eerie twilight, shadows dancing like ghosts of ages past. It's here that I remember. I remember the night my mother, a ghost of strength wrapped in silk, whispered to me beneath a blanket of stars. You will carry the weight of our people, my daughter, she said, the tremor in her voice a haunting melody of pride and fear. My fingers trembled as I clutched the frayed end of her shawl, a piece of home, of identity, slipping through my grasp. But tonight, the universe has conspired to remind me of the burden I wear. A silhouette looms in the distance, a figure cloaked in darkness, striding with purpose. It's Isulu, my sister-in-law, her face a portrait of defiance and despair. She carries the scars of 1,000 battles waged in silence, her eyes holding the weight of a world that refuses to see her. Isulu, I call, my voice barely a whisper against the howling winds. She turns, and for a moment, I see the flicker of hope, a candle struggling against the tempest. We share a bond forged in the crucible of grief, each of us a thread in the tapestry of our family's legacy, yet each thread fraying at the edges. I remember, she says, her voice a fragile thread, the day they took our men, leaving us with nothing but memories and the bitter taste of loneliness. The memory slices through me, a knife made of ice. I remember the shadows in our home, the way laughter became a ghost, haunting the corners of our lives. Together, we tread closer to the abyss, the chasm of our fears laid bare before us. The memories swirl like a storm, chaotic, beautiful, tragic. I see Isulu's husband, a warrior carved from the mountains, his spirit now a flickering candle in the wind of war. I remember the way he held her close, the warmth of his embrace, a bastion against the cold. But that warmth is gone, extinguished by the merciless hands of fate. They don't understand, she says, her voice trembling with the weight of unspoken truths. They see us as shadows, as vessels to bear children and carry burdens. They forget the strength we possess, the fire that burns within us. Her eyes blaze with resolve, and I can't help but reflect on my own struggle for identity, the longing to break free from the chains of expectation. I remember the stories my grandmother told, her voice a tapestry of laughter and sorrow woven through the years. We are warriors too, she would proclaim, her eyes sparkling like the stars above. We carry the spirit of the steppes in our hearts. We are the roots that bind our families, the winds that guide our men home. But as the shadows lengthen, doubt seeps in like a poison. Are we? I murmur, my voice a threadbare echo. Or are we simply the remnants of what once was, haunted by our past, shackled to our fate? The question hangs heavy, a noose tightening around our shared sorrows. Suddenly, the ground trembles beneath our feet, a reminder that the world around us is alive, breathing, and unsuspecting of our pain. The crisis of our identity collides with the reality of our existence. We are not just wives, we are warriors in our own right. As if summoned by the storm of our emotions, the figure from before draws closer. It's Tema, Isulu's brother, a man torn between loyalty to family and the call of duty. His face is a mask of conflict, eyes flickering with the remnants of hope and despair. You shouldn't be here, he breathes, his voice laden with urgency. The night is full of shadows, danger lurks. But danger is already here, nestled in the fibers of our beings, coiled like a serpent ready to strike. We are the shadows, Isulu replies, her voice steady, a warrior's resolve. And shadows can shift, can dance, can become something more. Tema's gaze darts between us, the weight of our shared history pressing down like a mountain. You think you can change this, he asks, disbelief etched in every line of his face. You think your voices can drown out the drums of war. I remember the tales of old, the women who forged paths through the storm, speaking truth into the void. We will be heard, I declare, my voice rising above the storm, a clarion call against the night. We will not be silenced, not while we carry the spirits of those who came before us. But as the wind howls louder, I can feel the cracks forming in our resolve. The cosmos above spins relentlessly, indifferent to our struggle, while time ticks by, each moment a reminder of our fragility. In this space, we teeter on the brink, not just of a physical confrontation, but of an emotional awakening. Isulu steps forward, her chin lifted defiantly, eyes shining with a fierce light. We are the legacy of the Mongol wife. Our identities are not defined by what has been taken from us, but by what we choose to fight for. Her words hang in the air, charged with an electric intensity that thrums through our veins. I find myself nodding, the rhythm of her declarations echoing in my heart. I remember, I whisper, the strength of our ancestors, the fire they ignited within us. Our voices intertwine, a tapestry woven with threads of conviction and defiance, creating a shield against the dark. And just as the night swallows us whole, I can sense the pulse of the world shifting beneath our feet, a tremor of change, of rebellion, of a new beginning. We are not just women in a landscape of shadows, we are the storm itself, wild and untamed. As the sky darkens, I hold on to the flicker of hope within me, a flame refusing to be extinguished. Here we stand, trembling, uncertain, but unbowed. The cosmos watches, and our hearts beat in sync, echoing the call of a new identity, one that rises from the ashes of loss and despair. And as the night deepens, we step into the unknown. Together,